Welcome back to Motive and Malice. Today, we're heading to Ankara, Turkey, for a case that starts with what police initially called a suspicious death. But trust me, it spirals into something so much bigger, igniting a national movement. This is the story of Şule Çet, and how her final moments ended up putting an entire country's justice system under the microscope. Imagine getting this text from your roommate. At 1:47 in the morning on May 29th, 2018, 23-year-old university student Şule Çet sends this exact message. Fuck, he does not let me leave. These would be some of her last words, because just a couple of hours later, she was gone. So let's set the scene. We're in Ankara. It's the early morning hours of May 29th, and a young woman, Şule, has fallen from the 20th floor of a skyscraper. The story the police were given? Well, it was simple, almost too simple. They were told it was a suicide. But as we'll see, the truth was anything but simple. Okay, so let's break down how this night unfolded, because every detail really matters. It starts with an invitation. Şule's ex-boss, a guy named Çağatay Aksu, asks her out for drinks. But things take a turn. After midnight, they're not at a bar anymore. They're at Aksu's office on the 20th floor of a high-rise, along with his friend, Berk Akand. And that's when Şule sends that terrifying text message. And then, silence. Until around 4 a.m. when her body is discovered on the pavement below. Right away, two completely different stories start to take shape. On one hand, you've got the two men who were with her, Aksu and Akand. Their story? A tragic suicide. They claimed she was depressed about money and just jumped. But on the other hand, you have everyone who actually knew Şule, her friends, her family, and they were screaming from the rooftops, no way, absolutely not. They insisted she would never ever take her own life. For them, this wasn't a tragedy, it was a violent crime. And you know what? That official story from the two men, it started to fall apart, and fast. This is where the power of the public comes in. A digital cry for justice literally rewrote the story, flipping the script from suicide to what so many believed it was all along, murder. So why were her friends so sure? Well, let's look at the facts they presented, because they've made a pretty compelling case. First off, and this is a big one, Şule was terrified of heights, a severe phobia. Does that sound like someone who would willingly go near an open window on the 20th floor? But it's more than that. She was looking to the future. She had just gotten a new apartment, painted the whole thing herself, was out buying new furniture. She was building a life in Ankara. These are just not the actions of someone who's about to end it all. So her friends, and especially women's organizations, refused to let this go. They took to social media, and the hashtag Justice for Şule Çet, it didn't just trend, it went viral. It absolutely exploded across Turkey. It got so big, so loud, that the authorities really had no choice but to stop, turn around, and take a much, much closer look at this case. And when they did look closer, oh boy, one single piece of forensic evidence just blew the whole suicide theory right out of the water. 4 meters, that's it, just a number. But this number, the horizontal distance her body was found from the base of the building, it was about to change absolutely everything. Okay, so this is where cold, hard science comes in and just starts demolishing the defendant's story, piece by piece. First, that 4-meter fall. Experts came in and said, look, to land that far away, you can't just jump or fall. You have to be pushed, period. Then there's the window itself. It only opened about 30 centimeters. That's barely a foot wide. And get this, Şule's fingerprints? Nowhere to be found on it. But you know whose DNA they did find? Berk Akand's, right under Şule's fingernails. A classic sign of a struggle. She fought back. And the autopsy told an even darker story, revealing evidence of sexual assault and a violent struggle. And the final, just unbelievable piece? Her underwear, a crucial piece of evidence, had mysteriously disappeared. So, with this absolute mountain of physical evidence, the case finally goes to court. But you have to understand, this wasn't just about putting two men on trial. This became something much bigger. It felt like the entire system was on trial, with the courtroom becoming this battleground for the very culture itself. And the defense's strategy? I mean, it was just staggering. Instead of defending their clients, they decided to attack the victim. They basically put Şule herself on trial. They argued about whether or not she was a virgin. They shamed her for drinking alcohol with men after midnight. They actually suggested that by just being in that room, she was implying consent. They even blamed her father for not sending her enough money, trying to prop up that bogus suicide theory. It was shameless victim blaming from top to bottom. Now, this disgusting strategy wasn't just pulled out of thin air. It taps into a really controversial part of the Turkish Penal Code called unjust provocation mitigation. Basically, it's a legal loophole that can get you a lighter sentence for a violent crime if you can somehow argue that your victim provoked you. Feminist lawyers, though, have a different name for it. They call it a masculinity sentence reduction, and that really tells you all you need to know. And if you want to see just how this plays out in the real world, just look at this quote. This is from a real court decision in Turkey from 2011 in a different case. A judge, justifying the lighter sentence for a man, wrote that, quote, "The character of Turkish men does not let them swallow these words so easily." Let that sink in. It's an absolutely chilling look into a legal mindset where a man's honor can literally be used as an excuse for violence. So after this incredibly intense trial, with the whole country watching, the court finally reached a verdict. And while it was a landmark ruling in many ways, you'll see that the fight for what you might call real justice, well, that was far from over. So here's what they got. On December 4th, 2019, Çağatay Aksu was found guilty of murder, sexual assault, and false imprisonment. He was sentenced to life in prison plus an extra 12.5 years. His friend, Berk Akand, was convicted of aiding and abetting those crimes, and he received 18 years and 9 months. But, and this is a big but, there was a catch that left a really sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. Aksu's sentence was supposed to be aggravated life, which is much harsher, but the court reduced it to a standard life sentence. The reason they gave? His good behavior in the courtroom. As you can imagine, people were absolutely furious. Good behavior? For a man convicted of such a brutal crime? And the story doesn't end there. This thing dragged on for years. You have the first verdict in December 2019. Then an appeals court confirms it in June of 2020. But it took until December of 2022, 3 full years after the conviction, for Turkey's highest court to finally shut down the last appeals and make these sentences stick for good. So yes, the convictions were a victory. But what Shule's tragic case really did was rip the curtain back on a much bigger, much uglier problem. It exposed this nationwide struggle against what activists call a culture of impunity, a system where too often perpetrators of violence against women feel like they can get away with it. And if you're wondering why this one case hits such a nerve, you just have to look at these horrifying statistics. In 2020 alone, 300 women were murdered in Turkey. But look at that second number. Another 171 women died in so-called suspicious deaths, many of which, you can bet, were initially dismissed as suicides, just like they tried to do with Şule. And that is why Şule became more than just a victim. She became a symbol. You had activists outside the court chanting not male justice, but real justice. That phrase says it all, doesn't it? They weren't just fighting for one woman. They were fighting against a whole system that they felt was built to protect perpetrators and blame victims. Which really brings us to the big, lingering question at the heart of this whole story. Think about it. When it takes a massive public outcry, a viral hashtag, and nationwide protest just to get the wheels of justice to turn, what does that really say about the justice system itself? Is it truly working as it should? I really want to know what you think about this. Does a verdict that relies so heavily on public pressure still count as true justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you want to dive deep into more cases like this, make sure you subscribe to Motive and Malice. Thanks for listening.